Hello and welcome to the state of Kentucky. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and today we have Joannie Prentice with us to talk about what's happening in this year's General Assembly. Before we begin, let me say that if you like State of Kentucky and our other videos, please hit the like button down below and subscribe so you see all of our videos and know what's going on. And as well, go to forwardky.com and become a member, and you can get more perks that way. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the state of Kentucky. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and today with me is Joannie Prentice. Joanie, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Thanks, Bruce. Good to be here.
So Joanie is one of these amazing people that actually sits and watches committee meetings in Frankfort and actually tracks bills and keeps up with what's going on. So I thought it would be interesting to have you on and to talk about what we see in this year's General Assembly. Obviously, there's some things that maybe aren't so good, and there might be some things that are good. But before we get into that, I want to share this page with everybody. So let me put this up on the screen, and let me point out a couple of things. This is the LRC site, the Legislative Research Commission site, which you get to by going to legislature.ky.gov. And when you go there, you'll see a bunch of things. But what you care about right now is this thing that says bills. And when you click on bills, you get this page that we're on. And then if you go to 2025 regular session, you get all of the stuff that's going on in Frankfort. There's a ton of information on here. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I want to point out two or three things quickly. One is the committee calendar. If you click on this, you will see the committee meetings for that day and what they're going to talk about and so on and so forth. And then if you want to see what happened the day before, in the House, here's the proceedings, and in the Senate, here's the proceedings. And so you go and look at this. I'm going to click on the Senate proceedings, and here's all the bills that had something done to them yesterday in the Senate. But the ones you really want to pay attention to are down here where it got the first reading, second reading, and then finally passed. So those are the things I think that you want to pay attention to. That today is what we're going to be talking about. So let me get back to us. And so
can I add two things?
You may add anything you wish.
That very first page that you showed, I think it's real important for people to know that you can watch it live, just like I do. So there's a button that says live coverage. And so if you ever want to go in and watch a committee meeting, or if you want to watch the sessions, just click that button. And then the other piece that I find really helpful is committee votes. When you get to that page that has proceedings on it, I love looking at the committee votes to see who voted what way in committee. That tells me a whole lot.
Yes, I agree. What I do when I do the update every morning, and later I'll do the promo about Forward Kentucky. When I do the update every morning, I start by looking at the committee votes because I think it's interesting. It's a big PDF of all the committee votes, and you scroll down through it, and a whole bunch of them will be unanimous votes in committee. But occasionally you'll find one that's like, there was one yesterday that was 6-5.
Yeah.
And then rarely, but occasionally you'll find one that fails in committee.
We had one that failed. Yeah.
Yes, so far. All right. So I'm thinking that I probably need to do a resource page on the website about how to use that site. That would probably be a good idea. Okay, Joanie, what's your overall impression of this year's session so far?
Oh, it's been so boring. And it's moving so slowly here at the end.
Oh, God.
Well, I think a couple of things that I want to point out. There has been a lot of irregularity in the process this year.
Sure.
More so than there has been. I know you know that the League of Women Voting is tracking all the irregularities that are happening with how many readings a bill gets before it's even heard or assigned to a committee. I counted up, I color code them on my bill tracker, and I counted up right before this podcast 219 irregularities so far. And I may have missed some. And then the mule bills this session
Yes.
so far, I have 108 mule bills. I might be off one. I try to catch them all, but I think that's pretty close.
Well, now let's take a minute for those watchers and listeners who may not know, what is a mule bill?
A mule bill is a placeholder bill, and there are reasons, good reasons, for there to be placeholder bills at times. The LRC staff are busy drafting all this bill language, and sometimes you just can't get to all of those bills. So a legislator will do a placeholder bill, or what we call a mule bill, until that draft language can get completed. But oftentimes, and I'm sure there are many of you that remember the sewer bill, a mule bill holds a place, and then they can stuff it with whatever they want to in the form of a committee sub when it gets heard in committee. And what we're seeing this session is that the mule bills get 2 readings before they even have any content, and then they go to committee, get a committee sub, and they come right out and get voted on. I think a mule bill went in yesterday at 11 a.m. and was voted on at 3 p.m. And that's just not right. I mean, it might be possible, but it's just not right. And it excludes the public from being able to participate in the process. You can't get to a committee meeting because you don't know what it's going to be about. You don't even know if it applies to something you're interested in. So I really find that part discouraging.
I have been impressed with a couple of other things. One is that the Republican leadership, and we need to be very plain with everybody, that everything that's happening in Frankfort is controlled by the Republicans. The Democrats have no power really at all. And out of the Republicans, we're talking about President Robert Stivers in the Senate and Speaker of the House, David Osborne, in the House. So those 2 gentlemen are pretty much steering the train, as it were. And so the bills that they have picked to be some of their primary bills are some of the cultural issues. They're coming after DEI. They're coming after other things that they think their base would care about. But once you get past those horrible bills, there are some good bills that are moving, which is nice to see. It's like, okay, we have to pay some dues over here. We're going to pay these dues over here. Once we pay those dues to the crazy people in our base, then we're going to go actually try and do a few good things.
I agree.
So I want to spend a few minutes talking about the bills we've seen. And I have my list, and I'm sure, Joanie, you have your list.
I do.
Let's talk about bad bills. I put up an article on the website on KentuckyKY.com the other day, 12 stinky bills. These were 12 bills that I thought really were bad bills. Some of them are moving, some of them maybe aren't. So that's a good thing. So tell me some of your top stinky bills.
Oh, some of my stinky bills, I think, are the culture war bills. I mean, I think those are the big, I include 3 categories under that. I call it the anti-DEI bills, the anti-trans bill, and then the anti-immigrant bills. And those all mirror what's happening on the federal level. And Frankfort wants to be the little, the little federal government. And so bills like House Bill 4 that passed out of committee after a contentious debate yesterday, Decker's bill that would do the anti-DEI stuff all through the university. I mean, basically just erase DEI from every piece of language, plus do some oversight and make them do some reporting, some onerous reporting.
Yes.
All the time about, what they're doing. So that one is posted for passage today. Again, that was one of those bills that got readings before it got heard in committee. And so now it's on the calendar to be voted on today, and it will pass. And that makes me sad.
It will, let's say it will pass in that chamber.
Yes, it will pass in that chamber, and then it'll be up to Stivers and I will say Givens to make a decision on whether that gets heard in the Senate.
Right.
And moves forward. They may stall it out and just not do anything with it after, the base has been fed from the House, like you said. Yeah, I
So
agree.
what's the bill number?
It's House Bill 4.
Yep. So it's one of the top 10, which means it's a priority for leadership.
Right.
Okay, go on.
Let's see. And then there's the anti-trans bills. And again, this mirrors the federal stuff. So Senate Bill 2, again, a high priority bill. That's Mike Wilson's bill. No health care for trans people that are incarcerated. And mostly that is about medicine. And that came out of a report that they heard in an administrative reg that that trans people were getting medicines that are being paid for by the state, and that just
Right.
blew their mind.
Right.
So they needed to stop that for sure. So the bill says that the state won't provide those medicines to those people. These are medicines that people have been on sometimes for years.
Right.
And they said, now, if a doctor says it'll be really injurious to their health, then we can wean them off, but they're going to stop them. You know, I just find that cruel and unusual
Sure it
punishment.
is.
And some of these people haven't been convicted. So it's just, I don't know. I find that one really ludicrous. Yeah. So that's Senate Bill 2. And then another anti-trans one is House Bill 495. That's Hale's bill. And that's the one that allows and protects conversion torture. And that's for our LGBTQ plus community. And Governor Beshear did an executive order that said that conversion therapy was banned. They call it conversion therapy. I call it conversion torture. So conversion torture would be banned on people covered by state plans. That's all he could do with his executive order. This one would allow therapists to do conversion torture and be protected. So I find that
Be
that's
protected
posted
from
for passage.
liability.
Yes, and protected from liability. Yeah, that's posted for passage. So that one is moving. And then on immigrants, Philip Wheeler put out Senate Bill 151, and that's that no tax dollars, no state tax dollars can be used to pay undocumented immigrants or asylum seekers for any goods or services. So if an employer has a construction company, he's got a state project bid, and he hires some undocumented workers because he can't get anybody else to do that work, then that undocumented worker shouldn't be paid. Now, this will allow nefarious contractors to not pay undocumented workers. I mean, it's just wrong. And most of these people that come, whether they're documented or not, they are some of the hardest working people you will ever meet in your life. Give me a crew of immigrants any day to work on my roof, and I just had that done.
Well, that's exactly what I thought. It's like, okay, so good luck getting somebody to fix a roof
Yeah.
on any state building.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, those are some bad ones in the culture wars thing, and
And
like
there's a
you
bunch of them
said,
that aren't moving. You know, I will say there is a bunch of them that aren't moving. There's some about ICE cooperation. Those aren't moving.
right?
And then Roberts had one where he wanted universities to ask all students their immigration status and report it to ICE. Those aren't moving. So a lot of the culture wars one don't really move. The really egregious ones don't move.
The other thing that I think is an overriding theme is antagonism toward Governor Beshear.
That was my next topic.
So, it's like, okay, in the morning update, I use emojis to indicate certain bills. And not so much this year, but last year I had an emoji of the person flexing their arm, and it was the legislature flexing its muscle against Governor Beshear. They're just all up in arms about administrative regulations. I mean,
And there's some even sillier ones. I've got on my list 9 bills that I call anti-Andy bills.
yes.
And
Well, give us a couple.
do you want the ridiculous ones or the ones that are moving?
No, the ridiculous ones. Let's start with those.
Let's start with the ridiculous ones. Let's see. Oh, so if the governor advocates for a public issue, this is all in response to Amendment 2 of last year.
Right.
He can be sued for up to $500,000 and be charged with a felony.
Right.
I just think that's, and then another silly one is that they don't want him to present any ceremonial checks without checking with the General Assembly
Yes.
first.
By golly, those big checks. No, you can't do
I
that.
tell you.
And then there's the one about he has to ask permission before he travels overseas.
Oh yeah, that was my next one. Yeah, yeah, and only the AG, the Attorney General, can initiate litigation with the feds. Andy would not be able to do that. So that's yeah, that's just silly.
So what anti-Andy bills are moving?
Let's see, House Bill 6, which is one of the administrative reg bills. That one has the House, so that's over in the Senate side now. Senate Bill 20, another administrative reg one, is passed out of committee. That passed back in February is what I've got. And then just today, there's one, and I don't know that it's so much an anti-Andy, but I think it basically is at that Senate Bill 84. That's the judicial review. It was a really good committee meeting. I like watching the committee meetings. You really find out a lot of information. There are so many smart people. Yeah. Cassie Chambers Armstrong is brilliant.
Yes.
But judicial review of agencies, they're basically saying it's the whole Chevron, the deference, the Chevron deference piece that came out of the Supreme Court. And so Kentucky wants to say that we can't give deference to any agencies. They don't want our judges to give any deference to agencies who have expertise in areas.
Right.
And
we need to explain again for the listeners. The legislature passes laws, bills, but it's up then to the executive branch to implement them.
correct.
And the legislature typically does not write processes and procedures and so on and so forth. That's up to the executive branch. And so you have these agencies that, in order to execute the laws, they pass or they put in place regulations. If the bill was about an income tax change, then they have to do all these regulations about how you do your income taxes. Well, now the legislature is saying, no, you can't do that without our permission. And the judicial review one, you're exactly right. You can, if I remember correctly, Joanie, they said you can't even have somebody from the agency representing the agency in the hearing. The agency cannot be in the hearing.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. All right.
So the bigger piece is one of the legislators, Democratic legislators, I can't remember which one, they brought out a really good point. There are 2 levels of administrative reg review already in the legislature. So when the executive branch promulgates those regulations, it gets reviewed by the administrative reg committee, and then it also gets reviewed by the originating committee. So there's 2 levels of review already. So I guess I just don't see the problem other than it's a power grab.
Yeah, of course. All right. So we've got the culture war bills.
Yeah.
We've got the anti-Andy bills.
Yeah.
So beyond those, what are some other, let's say, top 2 or 3 or 4 bills that you see as bad?
The health bill, the taking the fluoride, the optional taking fluoride out of the water. Kentucky has some of the worst dental statistics in the country. We are near the bottom. And for us to consider making it optional to have fluoride in the water just because of an RFK anti-vaccination, anti-fluoride stance, I mean, it just blows my mind. As a nurse, I just can't hardly fathom why we would do something that is documentedly wonderful.
And talk about playing into stereotypes.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody thinks of Kentucky as a bunch of toothless hillbillies. Well, now we're going to have a bunch of toothless hillbillies because we're getting rid of fluoride.
Well, and then the other point that was brought out is how much money it's going to cost us. I can't remember the statistic, Bruce, but it's like a third of our kids are on Medicaid, and there aren't many dentists that will take Medicaid. So you're going to have a whole bunch of kids with tooth decay and tooth rot and needing teeth being pulled, number one, because they can't get into a dentist. And, I mean, it's just going to blossom the cost of dental care. And it's going to impact health. If you talk to most dentists, they will say they can look in a person's mouth and tell you what the general status of their health is.
Right.
Mouth care is huge. So let's see what else. Environment. Senate Bill 89. It is. There are a number of environmental bills. Again, did you know that coal is coming back? I've heard it over and over in the legislature. That
they need to get coal in their stockings. I mean, yeah, that's right. That's right. All those jobs are coming back.
All those jobs are coming back. But Senate Bill 89, which has passed the Senate, right? I'm pretty sure, yeah. Yeah, it's passed the Senate. It's about, we don't need rules and regulations to protect small streams or groundwater. I thought one of the Dem legislators, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about the explosion. I think it was Keturah Herron. She was saying the explosion at the plant in Clifton. Says, what happens with all those chemicals and things that go into the water? If you don't have environmental regulations that look at what happens to those smaller streams, then what are we doing? Do we want unsafe drinking water? Do we want, hazardous conditions in our water supply? So I find that another bill that is just sad, but it looks like it's going places.
So let me name a couple of mine. And I don't have my list in front of me, so you'll have to help me with numbers. There's the My Religion Trumps Your Healthcare.
132.
Yeah, if your healthcare need offends my religion, I don't have to provide you with healthcare.
Right.
That one just floors me.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I think. I guess
was it? It's SB 60. That is the religious, expanding religious liberty, and it is so vaguely written that basically anything could be called, well, that's hurting my religious liberty. And of course, what it is about fairness laws. Sure. It's about, you can't have a fairness law because that offends my religion. So I get to discriminate against anybody I want in the name of religion.
And you can sue.
Yes, you can
sue. So they call it jackpot justice, because all of these out-of-town groups come in and make up these lawsuits and can make a whole bunch of money by suing. So
yeah. And the thing that has always fascinated me is that this is the justification that was used against interracial marriage 50, 60 years ago. You can't have a black and a white getting married because that offends my religion. Well, we're going right back to that here in Kentucky. Yeah. That's another bad bill. It's the Christian nationalist bills that just make me want to throw things.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we've hit a number of bad bills. Do we have any good bills to talk about?
There are good bills. Can I talk about the one that's near and dear to my heart first?
Well, sure. And I know which one it is.
Which one it is. Senate Bill 27 passed out of the Senate. It is going to allow a Parkinson's data registry to be initiated here in Kentucky. They think implementation, if it all passes, would be in 2027. This is part of an effort by the Michael J. Fox Foundation to do nationwide data gathering. All the information would be, just statistical information, no name, no date of birth or anything like that. So it would be a lot of statistical data with privacy protected that will help with research. So I wrote as soon as I saw this bill pop up, I wrote an email to Senator Storm, who was the primary sponsor. And, the funny story was during committee meeting, a woman from Eastern Kentucky spoke on the bill. And at the end, she says, now I've heard that it takes a year or two or three to get these bills to really get passed in these chambers. She said, I don't have that kind of time. I have Parkinson's. I'm 69 years old. I'm going to be 70 next year. And she says, and looking at you all, I can pretty much guarantee you that one or more of you all probably already have Parkinson's. You just don't know it yet. It was a great, she did a wonderful job with her testimony, but I'm excited about that one. So, but that's near and dear to my heart. Go ahead.
There's the maternity leave for state employees. That one seems to be moving, and that's a good bill.
Yep.
Tell me a couple of your good ones.
House Bill 291. I'm pretty engaged in criminal justice and kind of making sure that people aren't left by the wayside. This gives the judges discretion in the sentencing phase. If a person who is convicted and looking at sentencing is a primary caregiver for a dependent child, that the judge may take that into consideration in their sentencing, because they're wanting to try to keep the negative effects to families from multiplying when someone gets convicted. And these are lower level crimes, but I'm glad that it gives some discretion to the judges. And then another one for people who have been convicted of crimes, there is a process where you can apply and get a predetermination from a public employee type. Say you need training in a licensed occupation for a licensed occupation. You can get a predetermination to see if you're eligible. And that is House Bill 87. So I really like that one, that rather than somebody go out and do a bunch of training and education and then find out they really can't be in that because they have a prior conviction. So I think it's a good one.
What the other thing that is frustrating, just like there are bad bills that don't move, there are good bills that don't move. We used to have a rule that every bill had to go to the Committee on Committees, but not every bill had to be assigned to a committee. So you could see, okay, well, this one's not even assigned to a committee, so it's not going anywhere. Now they have a rule that every bill that gets filed has to be assigned to a committee. So you don't know really if it's going to move or not.
Right.
Harder. But some of the good bills, we have every session, we have abolished the death penalty. That doesn't go anywhere. Every session we have felon voting rights, restoration of felon voting rights. That one usually doesn't go anywhere. There's universal kindergarten, full day kindergarten, which they could fund with all this money they're throwing away with the income tax cut. There are bills like that you think, well, why wouldn't you do that? Well, because the Stivers and Osborne don't want that to move. For whatever the reason may be. Are there any other bad bills or good bills that you want to call out that we haven't talked about?
I want to remark one thing to that, though, is what you were saying is what I have found and what I've seen after following this for a number of years is that they do recognize when there are good bills. They just come back with Republican sponsors.
Yes. You have to have a Republican sponsor or you don't move.
Right. If it's not although we've got some really good legislators that are good at doing bipartisan sponsorship. Tina Bojanowski's good at it. Lisa Wilner's good at it. And they're getting some bills to move. Cassie Chambers Armstrong got a bill passed, one of her solo bills. So I think the Democrats are kind of figuring out ways to work within the system and hopefully, move things along. A bad bill left that we haven't talked about is the anti-protest one. And this almost happened yesterday, from my understanding. I had to miss the committee hearing on House Bill 4, the anti-DEI, but apparently it was a little contentious and there was a threat to have the police remove this person from the committee room. So the anti-protest bill is House Bill, 399, and there would be penalties, misdemeanor all the way up to a felony D, for interfering, which hasn't really been well defined, with the legislator or committee meetings. So they really don't want us there. Is the bottom line, and that is really sad. They have a supermajority. What are they afraid of?
They can do anything they want. Right.
I don't get that one, but that's one. Can I do one environment bill?
Do what?
One more environment bill?
Sure.
House Bill 137 is one of the air quality bills.
Mm-hmm.
And when I listened to it in committee, what I realized was they don't want groups like React. It's a group out of Rubbertown that does the environmental justice work there, and they have done some of their own air quality studies, and now they don't want to allow those to be introduced into any type of commission study or anything like that. So
Right.
that's another mean bad bill.
We also need to call out when the majority, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, by tradition, the first 10 bills in each chamber are the priority bills for the majority.
Right.
And so one of the things you can do is go to that legislative page that we talked about, go to the bill list, and then look at the first 10 bills and see, okay, these are what they think are important. I have been fascinated by what some of the priorities are. It's SB1. The number one bill in the Senate was the Kentucky Film Commission trying to get Hollywood to come make movies in Kentucky. I just found that I mean, I think it's okay, great. It's a good bill. It passed, I think, unanimously.
It's Robert Stiver's bill. Of course, it passed unanimously.
Yeah, right. But it's why would that be your number one? I just,
Well, think about it last year too, though. His research, his dream of I call them his legacy bills. So he wants these legacy bills. Sorry, yeah. President Stivers, but he wants to be remembered as he brought the film industry to Kentucky. He brought, a research triangle. He wants to be the North Carolina research triangle. So I think these are some of his vanity bills.
Well, good for him if we get the next mega hit here in Kentucky. But in the meantime, we got to deal with tariffs and their effects on all of us.
Yeah.
Let me point out that if you want to really keep up with what's going on in the legislature, one way you can do that is to become a member of Forward Kentucky. Joanie writes articles for us. I write articles for us. And if you become a member at the $5 a month level, you have access to our bill trackers. And so you can track these things in real time. Every morning they're updated. And then if you're a $9 a month member, you can get the morning Kentucky General Assembly update, where I list everything that happened the day before and everything that's about to happen that morning. So go to forwardky.com, subscribe, and you can be just like Joanie and up to date on everything that's happening.
Hey, Bruce, can I put in a plug for that morning update for the
Sure.
General Assembly? It is so good. Thank you for doing that. You are the best at making short titles out of what these bills are about. And I love that you put your little, your check marks, your green check marks and your red X's and stuff by that. At a glance, it is really an understandable piece and helps people to be able to know, oh, this is moving, or I need to look at this, or I need to call and voice my, opposition to that. So thank you for doing that.
Well, you are welcome. I actually had a reader, a member, who wrote me an email about a particular bill that I frankly didn't understand. And this person sent me a long email explaining what it was. And she ended by saying, please give us a green check mark. Okay.
I like that.
I need to announce one other thing, and then we need to wrap it up. We have a new thing. Well, two new things. We have two new things on the website that I want to talk about quickly. One is the visual bill tracker, which is basically a list of all the key legislation that we care about. It's not every bill, it's just the ones that we have listed in our key legislation. But it is a grid showing how far the bill has moved. And so you can scan down through there and go, oh, well, here's a bill that, wow, it's crossed over, and look at that. And it's red for bad and green for good. So that's one tool. And then I haven't done this for the last couple of years, but we are putting up our legislator scorecard. It's actually already up. So you can see how people are scoring. And this year, unlike the last time we did this, it was pretty much blue and red. I mean, it was pretty obvious which way things were going. And so the blue people were the good people and the red people were the bad people. Well, this year it's really mixed up in the middle. There are some Republicans who are higher than some of the Democrats, and there's actually a couple of Democrats that are way down here. And so you're like, that's interesting. So I'm going to put that up and promote it. Go check it out. I think I need to write a page on how to use it because it's not immediately obvious, but I think it's a good tool. Joannie Prentice, the bill tracker extraordinaire person, bless her heart, she actually watches the committee meetings for us. She deserves hazard pay for sure for doing all of this. Joanie, thank you for all you do.
Thanks.
And I may have you on again once session is over and we can celebrate the good ones, commiserate about the bad ones, and see if we've done any good this year. Thanks for being with us.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and thanks for all the good work that you do. It's a team effort, always.
It is. It is. Thanks.
All right.